Living Seed Media brings to you God's Word, which is His comprehensive equipment for changing lives. May the Lord impact your heart as you encounter His Word. For further inquiry or counsel, contact Peace House, P.O. Box 971, Boko, Benue State, Nigeria. Telephone numbers 0703 0363659, 0703 7681198. Email address lsmedia@livingseed.org, or visit our website at www.livingseed.org. Let us sit back and listen as the servant of God brings forth the word of life.
I want to thank the Lord for giving me this opportunity to share the story of how He is helping us in our business as Christians, where the Lord picked us from and where He has brought us to, and the future that He's presenting before us. I will summarize the story of Jill as being based on Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5, I believe, is a story we are familiar with and a passage of the Bible we have read over and over, but it's been the summary of what we have seen the Lord doing in the investment He has committed into our hands. Because of our time, instead of reading from verse 1, I'll read from verse 8. Verse 8, Luke chapter 5. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, "Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men." And when they had brought their ships to the land, they forsook all and followed him. By the time we were leaving the NYC, God had given us some very definite instructions that He was sending some of us to go into the business world to represent Him, even though we were all eager to go into missions and to go and be full-time gospel preachers. But God came across our way and impressed it upon our hearts, just as He's doing in this meeting, that there are several platforms in which this gospel will be preached. And I remember after the NYC years, God guided me to work in Bauchi State. I served in Gongola State then, now Adamawa State. And I really didn't understand what God was arranging, that God was giving me an opportunity to be exposed to the business world in the right way, to grow under a man who actually was willing to do his business in the Christian way. And I had the privilege of being given a free hand to not only set up the pharmacy, but to run it. Everything that happened, I was like my own boss, but under a man who was providing spiritual oversight. And I remember that at the end of the first year of working with this man, I was thinking that I would work there for about 3-4 years and maybe go for a master's degree and all of that and all of that. By the end of the first year, God spoke to me, said, "You have just one more year to go here." And I asked God, "Okay, what is the next thing?" God said, "I will tell you." At middle of the second year, God said, "You are going to start your own business." And the first thing that confronted me is the fact that I did not have any capital. And I did not know anybody I could go to say, look, God is calling me into business, but I need money. Along the line, God began to reassure me that it is him that I need, that he's able to raise the capital that I needed. Just about 3 months to the end of the second year, a brother came. We were together in the same chapel in the university, and he had a child who was asthmatic, and he came in to pick some drugs in the pharmacy. And he looked around. He said, brother, that God has blessed this pharmacy within 1.5 years. Because what God did was that the man I was working for left some capital in my hands. And after about 1 year, God had more than doubled this capital. The business had grown, and we could see God's hand on the business. In fact, I was amazed myself to see that I was running another man's business with a capital he gave, and we had an agreement with my boss. He only signed check for us to buy drugs. He was not tampering with our money. And we were able to run the place, pay the pharmacies, pay all the workers, pay our suppliers, and it was just like a model. And everybody that came around saw that within a space of 1.5 years, the pharmacy had grown. So this brother called me out. He said, look, brother, how much you need to do to establish a pharmacy? And I shared with him. And he said, don't you think two of us can start one? We were in the same chapel, and we never used to discuss business. It was never what was on our mind. We were always thinking of outreaches and all of that. And I asked him, brother, let's pray over it. After praying, we were sure God wanted us to go into partnership. And I was going to provide the services, and he was going to provide the finance. We wrote an agreement. We had a lawyer in the fellowship, because the matter of money can become a big issue, even though we are all born again, and we are all maybe speaking in tongues, reading our Bibles, involved in evangelism. This thing called mammoth, this thing called money, can be a big issue. So God helped us. Everything was well documented. We started that pharmacy, but the money we started with, it was at the instance of God. Because I remember in Luke 5, Peter and his team, they had toiled all through the night, and they had caught nothing. But after Jesus used the boat, and disciples were raised, and Jesus told them, launch into the deep, cast your net to the right, and we know the rest of the story. So it became clear that it just has to be God guiding us, instructing us, telling us what to do. Not just that I have capital, or I have people who have money, or I know something about business. I believe it has to be God. So we started this business. By the time we finished setting it up, the whole thing was very skeletal. Our capital got exhausted, but we knew God was in that business. And I remember one man came one day, he entered the pharmacy, he looked around, and he said, young man, don't you think you started your pharmacy too early? You should have worked with government a little while, made enough money, then you start your business. Of course, there was no way I was going to explain to him that God led us to start that pharmacy, that it was not our ambition, it was not something we set our heart to pursue, but for the fact that the Lord told us that was the next thing to do. And I was shocked. Within 6 months, we'll just buy drug from that same environment. We'll look around some wholesalers in the same town. We will reinvest the money back. Within about 6 months, most of our shelves were filled up. By the end of 1 year, in fact, we will come in there, the brother and I, we will laugh at what the Lord was doing. And people thought we were borrowing money from some areas, but we really were not borrowing. We were just turning around the capital that the Lord gave us, and God brought about the increase. By the end of the second year, that pharmacy was big enough to start another pharmacy. But God now spoke to our hearts. In fact, he spoke to us that it was time to leave Bauchi State. And while I was contemplating how I was going to share with this brother who we were in the partnership, I never knew that he also had reached the age of retirement from the university, and he was ready to leave with his family for the East. So it was just God making it possible for us to start that way. And we spoke, we agreed that we're going to sell the business. And God brought a Christian family. They bought that pharmacy from us. By the time we shared the money, just as we agreed in our initial memorandum of understanding, I had much more than I needed to start a pharmacy in Lokoja, where God led us to. And again, we went back to Lokoja. This time, God had given us some wisdom, understanding on how to nurture a pharmacy, how to nurture a business, and how to hand it over to Him, depend on Him, use the skills He has given to us, and trust Him for the increase. And we began the pharmacy in Lokoja, and again, gradually it grew, and it began to grow. And before we knew it, the word Jill became a household name in Lokoja, and we kept growing and growing. But along the line, there are quite a lot of things God began to teach me. I realized that that business itself was a way of knowing God. Each time we focused on God, I trusted Him, the business grew. Very tremendously, that people could see that this business is doing very well. And each time we looked away from God and we planned our own expansion ideas outside God, we realized that we always ran into trouble. I remember a particular incident. The pharmacy grew so much that people came around and said, why don't you start a wholesale business? Why don't you start wholesale business? And God actually was impressing on our hearts that we could go into wholesales at that point. But we never really asked God, where do we get the capital for wholesales? So the next thing was to say, okay, where do we get money? And we looked around. Someone said, look, if you come to Lagos, you can get some capital. And without asking God this time around, I went to Lagos. Within a week, I got that capital. And we brought it back to the business. But it was like bringing a devourer into our business. We brought in this capital, and then we stocked. Things were not moving the way they should. And we did not read the clause in the agreement of those that loaned us the money, that they had the right to increase their interests, as the source of their own fund also increases their own interests. And we just got a letter one day that we're going to be paying about 50%. You agree with me. I don't know the kind of business you invest in, and you'll be paying 50% interest. So all we had to do was to rush to pay that money off so that we could be free. And by the time we paid it off, I really hadn't learned my lesson. And I really can tell us that sometimes it's difficult learning the lessons God wants us to learn. We just find ourselves going back to the same mistakes. There is this tendency for all of us to always trust ourselves, trust our calculations, and all of that. But if there is anything I've learned over these years, is the fact that not just quoting scriptures just for quoting's sake, that with God, all things are possible. And that if we trust God, if I began to understand faith as following God's instruction, not just doing something, taking a step, and expecting God to bless it, or say, I'm faithing it, I'm exercising my faith. That faith itself is obedience to the instructions that God gives us from time to time. And God asks, he said, okay, did I ask you to fund this wholesale thing? And I said, okay, God, I don't even have where to fund it. Can you help us now? And when we prayed, we thought God was going to act immediately. The fund was not forthcoming. But in a very miraculous way, one man walked. I wouldn't know whether it was an angel. When our brother was preaching this morning, and he was saying that angels could come to our words, I believe it's a reality, a serious reality. Because this man looked so elderly, and he didn't look like a man who had money. That was one turning point in our business life. So he came in, he just looked at our office, he looked around, and he did as he asked us to give him one drug. I gave him, he said, can you cancel me on this drug? Imagine a patient asking you to cancel him. So I took him into my office, and as we sat down, the man looked at me, he said, young man, He said, I've been coming around here to buy drugs, and this shop has been a very well-stocked shop, but now it's going down. And he said, if I give you money, can you return this money back to me in 6 months' time? So the first question I asked is, who are you, sir? And where do you work? And how have you come across this kind of money you are? No, the man now introduced himself and told me where he works, the number of years he had worked, he had retired, and from the money that he just had a burden to give us money. I don't know whether you understand what I'm talking about. I mean, coming, not a bank, and not an individual I knew anywhere. And I told him, okay, sir, will you give me time to pray over this? Give me time. The man said, okay, when do I come back? I said, maybe sometime next week. So over a time, I was asking God, who is this man? What is the source of his money? Why will a man come into a shop and say, can I give you capital to do business? When we went to Lagos from Lokoja and got a money that plundered our business. And over the weekend, God assured me that he was the one sending that man to help us. So he came in and we discussed. He gave me the money. No, I said, you pay me back in 6 months. And I said, yes, sir. And that was how he gave us that money in a yellow leather bag. And we went in. That was another turning point in our business life. And God helped us. We paid him. No confusion, no nothing. In fact, up to today, I've not been able to chase that man. So I really, if you have seen an angel before, I would say I've seen one. I've seen one, because I don't know this man's. I can't trace the man, and that was the beginning of a major turning point in our business. Around 2005, God asked me a question. He said, how long have you been in this thing? I told God the number of years. He said, okay, can I move you on? And I said, okay, God, move me on. For me, moving on, my eagerness was that I should sell that business and go into full-time mission work and all of that. That's been my own personal desire. So I was glad that God was going to relieve me of that pharmacy. And at that point, we were doing extremely well. We were doing very well. I mean, we were well stocked. We had some reserves and all of that. We were just waiting for God's guidance. And God said, okay, I should watch how he will help us get over that sin. So I just was convinced inside me that let me sell off this business and move on into missions. And we kept praying. I remember I traveled to a particular country for a Christian walk. And I sent in my heart that God led me to work in that country. And one afternoon I was lying down on the bed after some meetings in the morning. And God opened my eyes. I saw I was in Europe. And then I saw I was also in Asia. And I was involved in handling drugs, helping some Europeans. And so I was saying, God, what is this? I just woke up in just like a trance. And God said, the next phase is that I will be involved in bringing in products from those countries he was showing to me. And of course, at this point, I was no longer afraid of capital. God had dealt with the issue of capital, the issue of provision. If God tells me that I'm going to build this kind of tent, I will know it's not me. I know it's just God that wants to work through me. So I said, okay, God, if it is you, work it out. We came for a meeting in Boko, and I was driving back. As I was entering Lokoja, I switched on my phone, and there was this call that some white people from Poland wanted to do investment and all of that and all of that. I can't go into all of this because of time. The long and short of it was that I used to work for NAFDAC, so they went through NAFDAC, and NAFDAC contacted me, and by the time they called me and told me they were bringing me into that thing, I knew that was what God showed me in that country, and I agreed to work with them. But you see, it's God needed to move me out of Lokoja. It was like I was glued there. I didn't know the way to live there, but God needed to move me out. And these people eventually said, look, we are going to we would like our office to be in Lagos. I never liked Lagos, and I never wished to do anything in Lagos. If I was a city, I have friends, brethren in Lagos. I used to pray for them. I wonder how they live in that city. I mean, it's a city of stress. That's so. And if you have lived in Kano, some Lokoja and all of that, to move into a city like Lagos would be something you wouldn't desire, because it's like you can only drive on a slow lane, and you're now asked to move to the fast lane. So I never really liked Lagos. But the way God arranged everything, I knew the hand of God was in it. I can tell you today I live in Lagos, but I really don't live in Lagos. My house from my office, they are just 100 meters apart. I mean, a lot of friends who live in Lagos, they ask me, how did you arrange it? The first thing was to accept the accommodation God made available to me. I had paid for an accommodation somewhere not too far from the office. And just the last minute, the landlord came and said, look, if I will only take the whole building. And there was nothing I was going to be doing with a duplex and four bedroom flats. So that was how God made sure that the stress of being in hold up, traveling up and down, God cut me off from it, and we began the work. In fact, I remember inviting Brother Kubo when we were doing our product launch. And along the line, God kept telling me that this relationship is just to give me ability to be able to cope with this city. And I kept wondering what God was saying until about 6 months ago. You see, business is tough in Nigeria. I mean, if you are going to do business God's own way, if you are going to cast your net to the right side as guided by the Lord, in Nigeria is tough. First, the people you want to do business with. I'm glad so many of us are CMD, some of us are here today. Everywhere in Nigeria is like rotten. I mean, if you are just looking at the health sector, it's like that where to do business, the doctors, in fact, one of the prayers we pray in our office is that God should deliver us from the doctors. You know, I'm not saying all doctors. You know, you just find out that these doctors will tell you, what will you give me for me to prescribe your drugs? I mean, very terrible. And all these companies are into all of this. So you now recruit staff. Your staff don't believe in what you believe in. In fact, at a point, one day I lost about like 6 staff. I mean, they resigned. And I kept asking them, why are you people leaving? They said, excuse me, sir, we are mixing Christianity and business. And that if we want to do business, let's do business. In fact, one of them told me that the place we had, our office, that we could start a church there instead of using it for an office. So you found that even the staff didn't believe that you can market drugs, you can just do it the way you know God wants you to do it, not violating your conscience, not inducing the doctors to write your drugs. And it was so bad that I ran to an elderly Christian who is in the same thing, and I said, look, excuse me, sir, I went with the staff, I said, I'm having this problem. 6 of my staff resigning the same time. And the issue is, we are not allowing them to give doctors money. They have to induce people. We have to use money. In fact, one of them said, it is money you use to get money. So I went to this elderly man, and he counseled me. When he shared his experience with me, a Christian brother, it helped my heart. He told me how he tried to use the same principles in his company, that it was also very hard for him. That in fact, one day he lost 10 of his staff, like a kind of gang up. And that he got home, he was so downcast that he got home, he called his wife to the bedroom and asked his wife to look at his face and asked her, tell me the truth, am I a bad man? You know, that it was that bad. And I can tell you, as we sit down today, it's difficult to do business in Nigeria in God's way. Very difficult. I mean, there was a doctor in one of the teaching hospitals who said he was going to frustrate our products from even being prescribed there. And the reason was because all other companies were giving them money. You go to the pharmacy, God still has a remnant kept in all of this. It's not as if the whole thing is, everybody is doing it. God still has his own people in the system, but they are very, very few. Very few. You go to pharmacy, if you can drop your drugs there and tell the pharmacist, on every packet you sell, you get 100 naira. Your drug will be as if water is flowing. They'll be calling you, come and supply. Come and supply. So this doctor was hell-bent on frustrating us. So I decided to go with my staff to him. And I said, Doc, what do you really want? He said, yes, I need to teach you business. And he went into his own concept of business. And when he finished, and I did as if I was going to play along. And I said, okay, doctor, how much do you want us to give you every month? And the doctor said, if you just give me 10,000 naira every month. I looked at him and said, only? He said, no. He said, you don't know what you are doing. He said, if 20 companies give me 10,000 every month, that do you know what it translates into? Then I looked at him and said, it translates into problems. And I said, to carry the problem of 20 companies is huge. And that, see, it's not the right way to live. And it's that bad. But thank God for also the few in the system who want to do the right thing. And by January this year, it was the company we represent in Poland. They also came in and said, look, you people are not doing this business the way we want. And we said, okay, what do you want us to do? So they sent a representative to Poland. So we had a meeting with all of our staff, and they demand a white man. He said, how much do we need to give the doctor to sell like $50,000 a month in a hospital? So when he said that, my staff went and said, you know, as if, why don't you want to give out this money? And I can tell you, to get jobs in FMCs, I mean, just normal. You know, yesterday when I was introduced as contractor and supplier of government institutions, I just laughed. It doesn't go that, it's not like that in Nigeria. You must play along with the people. You must do it the way they want. Otherwise, you will not get along with them. So these people said, how much do we need to give the doctors? And I looked at the man and I called him by his name and said, you don't need to give the doctor anything. We just need to do the right thing and be patient. And I said, 2.5 years. I looked at the value of what we sold in dollars. And I said, look, if we have sold this amount of drugs in 2.5 years, this is a lot of money. They said, no, that their capacity, they want to enter the Nigerian market. They want to capture. That was the word they used. And we said, what you want to do, we will not be able to do it with you. And because we can't be settling doctors, and then you give a doctor $10,000 to give you $50,000 prescription. I mean, like you go to a department, share $10,000 to the doctors, and expecting that every month they will generate $50,000 for you. So you do that in how many departments in a hospital? You are generating hundreds of thousands of dollars. At that point, we needed to part way with them. So we had meeting and I said, we will not be able to continue with this relationship. And of course, our other partners said, yeah, we will be able to do it. And this is okay, you can have this business. But you see, it was a very difficult time for us. Very difficult time for us. It's just like you have developed their products. You have done all the, I mean, we were in Jude, UCH, University of Illinois teaching hospitals like Home, UNTH, going around developing products only for them to come and say, we are taking these products from you. So, but God assured us that we needed to allow them go with their products. That, in fact, one of the things God told us was that to fight the good fight of faith requires living daily trusting God, not violating your conscience. And God said, we must make up our minds to stand and not go this way with them. They took those, so they were shocked. Usually they gave us the power of attorney for 5 years. And if they were going to withdraw it, we could charge them a lot of money. But along the line, God just said, let go. Just release these things to them. Release these things to them. And we released those things. Yeah, for my core staff, it was a painful moment. And we now say, okay, God, what do we do? What do we do? And along the line, God said he was going to give us our own brands. And developing your brand is tough. But As we kept praying, God led us to NGC, Nigerian German Chemical Company. They are based in Lagos. I'm sure some of us, we know them. And we just walked in there. You see, God guides. That's the thing I want to say about Christian business. See, if you are trusting God, if you are leaning on Him, you can never be stranded. You know, January it was like we were stranded. And literally, but we kept praying. And when we got in discussing with NGC, they said they could do for us contract manufacturing. We should register our brands. We did all of that. But with NAFDAC, it will take us some time. And what will we do? Are we going to lay off our staff? How are we going to cope? And along the line, we went for a meeting. And I was praying that morning, God, what is the way out? I will be 6 months, will be stranded. God said, no, you won't be stranded. He said, when you get to NGC, ask them the products they have registered with NAFDAC that they are not marketing. I should ask for the franchise. You know, nobody gave us information but God. So we got in that day, we had the meeting, and at the end of the day, they agreed to manufacture for us. Gave them our products. And then God said, ask them for the franchise of. So we now asked them, excuse me, are there products you have registered you are not marketing? They said, yes, we have. They told us they were not marketing their paracetamol. They were not marketing their cotrimoxazole. They were not marketing their perfluoxacin and several of their products because they have become so big that they really don't need some of these products. And they are very good products. And we asked them, can you give us this franchise? And I can tell you today, if you see M&B, Hest, NGC, paracetamol, or any of those OTC products anywhere around the country, they gave us that franchise. And that helped us to kickstart, as it were, our business. And then God reminded us that we needed to raise men. I mean, that we just can't keep bringing in these people who don't believe in what we believed in. I can tell you today, God has given us 6 new reps, and we are ready to continue with them. I can tell you we are not stranded by the grace of God, and God is making ways for us. I want to thank Him that He's helping us to cast our net on the right side. Praise the Lord.